Alright, I'm going to go over this Unit 1 study guide. So for number 1, it says what value is equal to negative 8. So if you look here at 8, it is the same as a minus negative 8, which we would do keep. There's not a number in there, but we would keep that, change that to a plus, and change that to a plus 8. Other people also see it as a negative times a negative. So if we distribute that negative to that negative, we always say same signs are always positive. So that's a positive 8. So that cannot be our answer. B is the absolute value of 8. The absolute value of 8 is 8. So this is going to equal to 8. Now the absolute value of negative 8, that is also 8 because the absolute value is the distance from 0. So when we do absolute value, it will never be negative. So we know it can't be those two because those are both 8. Now this one, it's a negative times the absolute value of 8, or absolute value of negative 8. We already said the absolute value of negative 8 was 8. If we multiply that by a negative, we would get negative 8. So your answer should have been D. Alright, if we move on to, I skipped one. Alright, so move on to number 2. Number 2 says, what is the difference in the height? What is the difference of the highest and the lowest elevations at the park? Well, we want to know, if we want to know the difference, that means we're going to subtract. So we're going to subtract. So in our highest elevation is 310 feet, while our lowest elevation is negative 49. Our subtracting integer rules tell us that if we're subtracting, we're going to keep, change. So we're going to keep the first number, change the subtraction to addition, and change the sign of the second number. So if it's a negative, it is now a positive. So now we just add. So 310 plus 49 will give us 359 feet. Now for the next one, we're just going to evaluate the equation. So we have a negative 3 minus 11. And what is it equal to? So we know, once again, if we are subtracting, our rules say keep, change. So we're going to keep this negative 3. We're going to change the subtraction to addition. And since this did not have a sign, we are now going to give it a negative sign. So keep, change. So now, if we have like signs when we're adding, we're just going to add them together, which gives us 14. But we're going to keep our sign, which is a negative. So that is a negative 14. For the next one, we have a negative 15 plus 6. When we're adding integers, make sure you're looking back now at your notes before this test, because our adding integer rules tell us they are different signs we are going to subtract. And then we're going to keep the sign of the number that has the highest absolute value. And some of y'all like to say the bigger number because it looks larger. So 15 minus 6 is 9, but because the 15 absolute value is larger than the 6, we're going to keep it a negative. So it would be a negative 9. All right, moving on to number 5. We have a negative 5 times negative 8. So if we have two negative numbers when we're multiplying and dividing, same signs, always positive. So same signs are always going to result in a positive answer. If they're different, it will give us a negative answer. So same signs, we know it's going to be positive. So now we just have to multiply. So 5 times 8 is 40. Same signs means it's positive, so you have a positive 40. All right, so now we're dividing. And we're dividing with same signs, so this is number 6. So negative 35 divided by negative 7. We already stated same signs, always positive. So 35 divided by 7 will just give us a positive 5. 5 times negative 7 is negative 35. All right, and now we're going to move on to number 7. So number 7 says, May threw a ball 26 feet in the air, and it landed in a ditch that was 9 feet deep. How far did the ball drop from its highest point of 26 feet? All right, so we already know we're starting at 26 feet because it wants to know how far did it drop from the highest point. So we start at 26 feet. If it is dropping, that means we're going to subtract. And it also wants to know how far, which is the distance. And to find the distance, we are going to subtract. So it's a positive 26 because we're standing on the ground. We throw the ball up. Now, it lands in a ditch that was 9 feet deep. So this is where it comes in. It is going to be a negative 9. All right? So, just to show you, this person, this is May. All right? And May throws a ball, and it's going to go up 26 feet. So it goes up, and then from there, it comes down. So if it went up 26 feet, and then it went down farther from where it was, another 9 feet. That 9 feet is now a negative because it's below this ground level. So ground level, sea level, all that will be our 0. All right. So now if we are subtracting, our integer rules are keep, change, change. So we're going to keep the 26. We're going to change this subtraction to an addition. And we're going to change that negative to now a positive. So now we just add. So 26 plus 9 is going to give us 35 feet. All right, number 8. A Marine called from Korea to say the temperature had risen 16 degrees since the sun came up. If it was 9 degrees when he called, what was the temperature before the sun came up? So, we're going to think about our starting point. So, he called, and when he called, it was 9 degrees. So, we're going to start at 9. Now, this is where you might get slipped up because it says in here that the temperature had risen 16 degrees. So that usually tells us to add, but it said it had risen 16 degrees since the sun came up. So if it's 9 degrees now, what was the temperature before the sun came up? So now we need to do the opposite, because we need to find out what it was before. So we're going to subtract 16 degrees. And now subtraction rules keep change because you can't subtract a big number from a small number. So it's 9 plus a negative 16. Addition rules state if they're different signs, we're going to subtract. So that gives us a 7. But we're going to keep the sign of the highest absolute value. The one with the highest absolute value is the 16. So it's going to be a negative 7 degrees Fahrenheit. You could also draw a thermometer. So you have 0, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. Alright, sometimes it helps to draw it out. So it tells us we start at 9. So we're going to start right here. But before 9 o'clock, it was 16 degrees cooler because it says after the sun came up, it rose 16 degrees. So we want to know how much was it before. So then we would just go by 16. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. That would have given us a negative 7. All right. The next one, we're just going to go ahead and do 9 and 10 together. So for each of these answers, you would have needed to solve it. So negative 16 times 8. We know if we have different signs, it's always negative when multiplying and dividing. So we know it's going to be a negative. So then we do 16 times 8. You should get a 224. All right, and then for the next one, all right, I'm sorry. I completely did that wrong because I was thinking of a different question. I wasn't actually doing the math. So, let's start over. So, 8 times 6 is 48. So, you have 8. 8 times 1 is 8. Plus that 4 is 12. So, you have a negative 128. For the next one, a negative 16 divided by 8. Multiplication and division rules state different signs. Always negative, so there's going to be a negative. So 16 divided by 8 is 2. Next, we have 16 plus 8. When we're adding integers, different signs, we're going to subtract and keep the sign of the larger absolute value. Well, our 16 is our larger absolute value, so we know it's going to be a negative. 16 minus 8 is 8, so we have negative 8. For the next one, we would have to keep change because it's subtraction. So we have negative 16 plus a negative 8. Same signs, we're going to add and keep the sign. So that is going to give us a negative 24. So for number 9, it wants to know which answer is the smallest. So when we're dealing with negative numbers, the one that looks the largest is actually the smallest because it's the one that is furthest to the left from 0 on the number line. So our smallest would actually be A. Now, when we're dealing with negative numbers, our largest is the one that is closest to 0, or the furthest to the right on the number line. So our largest is going to be B. So this answers number 9 and 10. All right, now we're moving on to number 11. So we're going to solve. So now we're just using order of operations. So since it's just adding and subtracting, we're going to start with the first two numbers. So the first two numbers is negative 7 plus 11. So adding rules, if they're different signs, we're going to subtract. 11 minus 7 is 4. 11 has the largest absolute value, so we're going to keep the positive. So we're going to bring down our minus, negative 3. Subtraction rules tell us to keep, change, then follow addition rules. So we're going to keep the 4, change subtraction to addition, and we're going to change that negative to a positive. Now it's just simple addition. 4 plus 3 is 7. All right, number 12. You're just going to look at a number line and choose which one is found at negative 3. You should have answered B. If you answered A, it's actually located at negative 7. So you should have found B as the answer for negative 3. All right, so for the next one, Barb had $10 in her bank account. She used her debit card to pay $41 for dinner. What is the balance of her bank account after the $41 is deducted? So it wants to know the new balance. So let's think about what we started with. It says we started with $10. She used her debit card, so she spent money. It even tells you later that she deducted. That means we're going to take it away. So then she spent a total of $41. Now, we can't take 41 away from 10, so we do keep change because it's our subtraction rules. Now, remember, we only keep change for subtraction. So now we have a 10 plus a negative 41. Adding different signs tells us we're going to subtract. 10 minus 41 is 31, but we have to keep the sign of our larger absolute value. 41 is the largest absolute value, so it's going to be a negative 31. Alright, so now we're going to move on to number 14. We just want to know the difference between the bank accounts of May and K. So, if it says that we want to know the difference, we know we're going to subtract. So, we want a difference between May and K. So, May's bank account balance is $1,473. Well, K is a negative 44. So here we are. We're subtracting integers again. So we're going to keep change. We're going to keep the first number. Change is subtraction to addition. And now that negative is now going to be a positive 44. Now we're just adding. So 4 plus 3 is 7. 7 plus 4 is 11. We're going to carry our 1. That's a 5. 1. So you should have $1,517 is the difference between the two accounts. Alright, so the next one, it wants to talk about a submarine. So a submarine is going to dive 2 feet per second. What is its depth after 20 seconds? So if it's diving, it's going to go down. So after 1 second, it's going to go down. It's going to go down 2, and it's going to go down another 2. And if it's going down, it's a negative. So what we're doing right here is repeated addition, which is the same thing as a multiplication. So we know that it's going to go down to negative 2 per second. So if it's going down 20 seconds, we want to just multiply that by 20. Different signs is always negative. 2 times 20 is 40. So its final destination, or the depth, is going to be a negative 40 feet. Alright, number 16. It wants you to model this on the number line with the solution. So with this one, I would do my number line by fourths because that's the smallest increment that we have. So I'm going to put my 0 right here. 1/4, 2/4, and 2/4 is the same as 1/2. 3/4, and 1. Then negative 1/4. And so forth. Alright, so we know we're going to go from 0 to 1/4 because that's where it tells us we're going to start. Now from that, we're going to take away 1/2. Well, guess what? We just said 1/2 is the same as 2/4. So if we're going by fourths, we need to take away 2 of those. So 1, 2. Our answer is a negative 1/4. Alright, so now we're moving back to fractions. You also have a fraction graphic organizer for operations in your notebook. So we want to evaluate, so we want to add. But before we can add fractions, they need to have common denominators, or at least common multiples. One way you can find this is just to write the multiples. So 5, it would be 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. So now I'm going to write the sixes. So we have 6, 12, 18, 24, 30. And I can stop right there because I see that the 30 is in common. Alright, so we want our denominators to both be 30. So in order to get this 5 to 30, we're going to have to multiply by 6, right? Because 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times 6 gives us 30. So we now have 30. Make sure you carry your negative sign. So whatever we do to the bottom, we're going to have to do to the top. So 3 times 6 is 18. Now it's plus. Now we have to get this 6 to 30. We're going to multiply times 5, whatever we do to the bottom. we do to the top, and that gets us 5 over 30. Now we have a negative and a positive. So this tells us we're going to subtract and keep the sign of the large absolute value. That's our rule. So when adding or subtracting fractions, you're going to keep the denominator, and you're going to add or subtract the numerators, which are the top numbers. So 18 minus 5, because it's a negative, plus a positive, is 13. 18 has the highest absolute value, so it's going to be a negative. You should have gotten negative 13 over 30. You cannot simplify this because nothing will be multiplied together to give you 13. All right, the next one we're going to evaluate. So this you're just using your order of operations. So first we're going to do parentheses. So negative 10 plus 14, different signs when we're adding, we're going to subtract. That is going to be a 4. It is going to be a positive 4 because the 14 is the higher absolute value. So now I'm just going to rewrite it with working out this in the parentheses. So now we have 4 times 4 over 2. 4 times 4 is 16. Oh, sorry, it's a negative 2. Can't forget that. So now we have 16 over negative 2. We've said several times that this fraction bar means we're going to divide. So we have a positive and a negative. So if we're dividing different signs, it's always negative. So 16 divided by 2 is 8. So your answer should be negative 8. All right. Now we have this one. The numerical expression 1/4 multiplied times 8 minus 1/2 is equal to. So if we want to know what it's equal to, we kind of want to solve it. Now you could do it two different ways. So one, you could use distributive property and distribute this 1/4 to each one of these. Or you could solve what's in the parentheses, then multiply that by 1/4. But since we've been using distributive property, I'm actually just going to go that route. So we now have 1/4 times 8 minus 1/4 times 1/2. So when we have a whole number and fraction, we have to add a 1 up under it. So that's 1/4 times 8 over 1 minus, and we'll go ahead and multiply this. So 1 times 1 is 1. 4 times 2 is 8. So we just have 1/8. Because remember, when you're multiplying, you just multiply straight across. So now I can do this one right here. So we have 8 times 1 is 8. 8 times 4 is 4. So we have 8/4 minus 1/8. So we want to have common denominators. So most of you would say just take the 4 and turn it to an 8. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to multiply each one by 2. So you have 16 over 8 minus 1/8. And that's going to give you 15 over 8. Now we need to divide 15 by 8. 8 can go into 15 one time. And that's 8. And we have how many left over? So 15 minus 8 will give you 7. So you put the 7, and then your denominator is now 8. So I kind of did that all in my head, but so I'm going to write it out. So you have 15 eighths. The numerator, or the top number, always goes in the box. Or the house. So 15, 8 can go into 15 one time. That's 8. 15 minus 8 is 7. This is your whole number. This is your numerator. And this is your denominator. So you would have 1 and 7/8. All right, number 20. The thermometer shows the temperature at the North Pole when Chris woke up this morning. The temperature rose 20 degrees by noon. What was the temperature at noon? So you have to look over there at the thermometer. And it says that we started at a negative 15 degrees because that's the temperature when he woke up. Well, it rose 20 degrees by noon. So if it's going to rise, we know we're going to add. And it says 20, so we're going to add 20. Now, if we're dealing with different signs when we're adding, we're actually going to subtract. So 20 minus 15 is 5. The 20 has the higher absolute value, so we're going to keep it as a positive. And we're done. It's just positive 5. All right. Number 21. It wants to know, choose the 2 in the box that are equivalent to negative 6/7. So you're going to look at these. So if we divided 6 by 7, because it's just a negative, it's just going to be a negative, right? So if we're looking at 1, then a positive divided by a negative is going to give you a negative 6/7, or whatever you convert that into. So this one, same thing. If you're going to divide a negative by a positive, it's just still going to be negative 6/7. Number 3, if you divide up a negative by a negative, those two negatives seem to kind of cancel each other out. So it's just a 6/7. And the last one is kind of like we did earlier. So a negative times a negative is a positive. So that's 6/7. So you should have answered A. 1 and 2. 1 and 2 will give you the equivalent to negative 6/7. All right. Number 22, we're going to evaluate. We're just going to multiply. So you could have done this 2 ways. So let's just multiply straight across. That's what you do. But when you have different signs and you're multiplying, it's always negative. So we know it's going to be negative. So 3 times 5 is 15. 5 times 8 is 40. We can simplify that. We can simplify that by dividing by 5. And you're going to get, don't forget to carry your negative sign, a negative 3/8. Another way you could have done this is cross cancel. So if there's a 5 down here and a 5 up here, they cancel each other out. So you just have a negative 3/8. All right. On the last stretch, we have 3 more to go. So we need to convert into a decimal. 4/5. And we said earlier, top number always goes inside the house. So we have 4 divided by 5. 5 cannot go into 4, so we're going to put a 0 and we're going to add a decimal. So how many times can 5 go into 40? 8 times, and that's 40. It cancels out. So your answer is 8/10. That is your decimal. For the next one, you have 25/4. So we want this as a decimal as well. So you can't have any remainders. It's not going to be a mixed number. 25 goes in the house. 4 goes on the outside. 4 can go into 25 6 times, and that's 24 with 1 left over. So now we got to add a decimal because we don't have any more numbers. And we're going to bring down our 0. It can go into 10 2 times, and that's 8 with 2 left over. We have to keep adding zeros till we have nothing left, or rather it repeats. 4 can go into 20 5 times. That's 20, and then we're done. So your answer should be 6 25/100. All right, last one, number 25. You have 9 math coins, and each coin is worth negative 25 points. How many points is that altogether? You could draw it out. This is 1. This is negative 9. This is a negative 9. This is a negative 9. And you could add them all together. Oh, I'm sorry. You have 9 math coins. All right, so this is a negative 25. I'm sorry. This is a negative 25. That's just repeated addition, right? Repeated addition is the same as multiplication. So each coin is worth negative 25. We have 9 of those, so we're going to multiply by 9. If we have different signs, it's going to be a negative. And then we're going to multiply 25 times 9. 9 times 5 is 45. 9 times 2 is 18. Plus 4 is 22. So you have a negative 225 points. If you have any more questions about the study guide or the test, feel free to message me on Remind or email me. Study, study, study.